Some information about Innovate UK, how we support new business models and ecosystems, and particularly, because I knew that I was going to be following on from the data analytics, I'll talk about how the data analytics examples illustrate those. So first, I hope that most of you know about Innovate UK, but I just have a few slides to remind everyone what we do. We are the UK's innovation agency, hence the name, and it's all about, we're all about driving productivity and growth, supporting businesses, and really to try and make the UK a great place, and for me, a great place for us to be manufacturing. And we want to be globally competitive, so we support and we encourage and fund projects and initiatives that are going to make that happen. Here's just a few of the numbers. So we have been running, does it say? We've been running since 2007 and invested 2.2 billion. Of which almost doubled with industry investment, and it saved 16 billion, which is 7.3 pounds per every pound invested. We've also, created a number of jobs and lots of new companies, etc. Funded loads of projects. As I think Jürgen Meyer said yesterday, we also squirt some money into the Catapults. I thought that was great. I'm going to keep using that one. So centres like MTC, the High Value Manufacturing Catapult Centres. We also have a number of other catapults. So here's a map of all the different catapult centres. And I think they're really important because they give the physical and the expertise availability to really help encourage and support innovation in the UK. We also are probably best well known for funding projects. So we fund collaborative research and development projects. Things like our recent manufacturing materials round 3 competition. We also fund knowledge transfer partnerships, and there's one here today with us who was assigned specifically for bringing digitization into his company. We also squirt money into the knowledge transfer network, and we have here Malcolm Held, who runs the For Manufacturing Initiative, which is very much about bringing Industry 4.0 to SMEs in the UK. But I'm supposed to be here telling you about new business models and ecosystems and not about Innovate UK. So, one of the nice things is that we need to identify what are the problems, what are the barriers, what is it that we should be supporting to make sure that UK companies are globally competitive. And so in 2013, I think it was, we ran a special interest group called the Flexible Manufacturing Special Interest Group to really identify what the problems were, how do we get UK manufacturers to be using digital manufacturing, and specifically to be more agile and flexible and responsive to customers. And what we found was that to maximize the value from digital manufacturing, you really need to consider what you're doing. You need to consider your business, and you need to consider your business model. Yesterday there was someone who said about how he'd put in sensors to their galvanizing furnaces, but the customer is, okay, they got the data, but unless you can find something that actually enables you to use that data, there isn't any value. So understanding your business and understanding how your business model might have to change in order to use that is really, really important. And this special interest group identified that was indeed the case. So what I thought I'd do was just walk through a few of the data analytics projects that we have funded. One thing with my job is that I get to see all kinds of different projects and new technologies. It's wonderful. So I've got a wealth of various different projects that I've seen. So I thought I would just focus really mainly on these data analytics ones to show how, the idea about new business models and new ecosystems is really important in all of these. So the first one, in terms of automation and autonomy, of course, you've got, in order to actually automate anything, you need to understand what it is you're doing. I think it was Ken of this centre who said, if you want to automate something, if you want to make a cup of tea, you have to actually figure out what is what are the steps in order to make a cup of tea? And it's not that easy when you think, okay, you turn on the kettle and then you have to time it, wait till it's done, and then you have to find the kettle. And when you walk through all the different steps, there's actually a lot of steps involved in making a cup of tea. So in order to automate anything, that's one of the things you have to do, is identify the actions, and you have to turn the knowledge that people who are doing it now, what they do, and turn that into these machine commands. So there were two different projects, quite different projects that looked into this, and I thought I'd mention them to you. So one of them is toolpath optimization for a cutting tool. And the problem is that there is an algorithm that you can use to tell you exactly what's the optimal toolpath. But it's a very difficult algorithm to solve, and it would take days and days and lots of computer time, and so it's not used because it's just too difficult. But a new spin-out came up with a new algorithm that they could use to shorten that period of time, and made it possible to come up with optimum toolpath very quickly. So that's great for someone who's actually doing some machining, but in fact it also opens up a number of new business opportunities, because they found from that then there were companies who could do the service. They could provide machining and identify the toolpath by using this algorithm in their computers to provide to other people, and to do a session where you can say, okay, I want this tool, send it to me, you make it and send it back to me. So a new business came out of that whole idea, which they didn't really think about beforehand. The next example is craft-based knowledge, trying to capture it so that you can use it in automation. And that's a very difficult thing to do. And this is actually an EPSRC-funded project. It's using psychology and AI to try and figure out how do we actually understand what craftsmen are actually doing, and how can we figure out how we can automate that. So two quite different examples, but both bringing some different ideas in on that. Another data analytics project was done for looking at preventative maintenance. And this was a company, Stork Food and Dairy Systems. They're now JBT Food and Dairy Systems. And they have a number of bits of equipment for filling lines and processing, etc. And they wanted to have a project to capture data like torque data, vibration data, etc., so that they could figure out when their piece of equipment were likely to go down, when should they have some maintenance and change the bearings, etc. And the results were amazing. I mean, they had huge benefits. Before the project even finished, they found that they kind of couldn't do without this. There was one episode where it was just about before Christmas, so most of the people in the plant were down. Someone looked through the things and found that the bearings were going, and if they didn't change them within the next couple of days, they were going to, the whole plant, that process would go down. So they sent them a call, and he said, "Are you sure?" "Yeah." And sure enough, yeah, there was a problem, and they changed it. So they solved the problem right away and identified a problem before it even happened. But I think one of the most important things that I got out of this project was the value of data. So they're running this in a dairy, filling some milk bottles or something. I can't exactly remember what it was. And within the data, finding the data from that one dairy, you might, within a few years, identify a variety of types of problems you might have. But because they had that system installed in dairies all over the place, they could identify problems that had arose in another plant and then find some of the same systems, in separate plants. So the fact that they were pulling data in from loads of different places meant that data was so much more valuable. And it's something that we need to think about in terms of data ownership and data value, that actually data improves in value the more you share it. We need to remember that. And then visualization is another really important area, because one thinks, oh well, it's just taking data and looking at it, but actually no, it's got some really important features. So 3 projects that I want to bring up to illustrate these. So one that will be talked about in the data analytics workshop later on this afternoon. And by the way, the virtual engineer one will be as well. So GE Power and Lanner did a project where they were looking at using discrete event simulation and 3D analytics to be able to see what was happening. So they could come up with a new design, and they could actually see what it was going to look like and whether or not it would fit in their warehouse, etc. So it enabled them to really go right from design through to operation and think how this is all going to work. Another one, the High-Speed Sustainable Manufacturing Institute, led a consortium where they were looking at taking data, and they're really just collating data and showing it to different people. And what they realize is that everyone needs to see data differently. So a manager wants to see one thing. He wants to see, is it good or is it bad? Somebody else might want to see something else, and the engineer is going down to check the equipment. He wants to know exactly what's going on. So they enabled a variety of different little tools and widgets so that people can see what data they needed when. And then finally, the Jaguar Land Rover they're very good at using simulation and modeling, and they've used visualization along with that to really help them virtually commission new things. So they had a new robot system. They commissioned it, they put it in before the robots were even there. They managed to do all that and have it completely in with no lost days. So it kind of shows that all these data analytic projects, the data analytics tools and visualization really enable communication all the way along the value chain, from design through to operations to users, and all the way, excuse me, through the supply chain as well. So you've got customers working with people who are the OEMs and to the customers. All of them too need to have this information, and by having a nice stream of data analytics and visualization, you can really join up that whole supply chain. So actually that brings me to the ecosystems, because we need good ecosystems. We need to be all working together. We need to join up the supply chains. And so data and digital manufacturing tools really enable us to do this. And we need to consider it. I've got just a couple of examples here. So additive manufacturing is something that we all want to happen. But one of the issues is that it needs a completely different supply chain. So you need to have, the metal has to be in a certain form and a certain quality. So we need to have suppliers of that. You need to have people who can measure it, and you need to have a whole different supply chain of how this goes through and the types of companies who are actually going to use that and design the equipment and check it through. So there's a whole new supply chain that has to be developed in order for that manufacturing process to work. And I mentioned, we can come up with new businesses and new supply chains required. So the servitization example, the preventive maintenance, it changes the whole supply chain. So there's a new supplier in there, and you need to figure out how it's actually going to work. So Jürgen Meyer was talking about his, the Industrial Digitization Review and his recommendations. And one of the things is we really need to bring the digital community and the manufacturing community together. I've been working with the Digital Catapult to do that kind of things, and the High Value Manufacturing Catapult has also been doing a lot of work in this. And of course, the Made Smarter proposal talks very much about building this ecosystem that all works together. And one other issue that we need to consider is finance. So we talked about new companies developing new business models, but sometimes the current supply of finance, etc., haven't really caught up yet. So one of the issues we find is that there's a new company and they want to do something that's quite new. How do they do it? We need to make sure that the banks understand their business model and how they're going to make money out of it. And so Innovate UK supports that. We're also working with banks, and I know the Catapults are working with banks, and this is something that we'll be talking about in the workshop in the afternoon. But also, we've just recently identified that we're going to do a loans pilot. So there's a loan pilot program coming up, and so I've just highlighted there's some roadshows that we're coming up with to talk about our new loans pilot, in case you're interested. And of course, we've got the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, which is industry-led and powered by R&D and academic collaboration. So this is money that the government has suggested will be put in to really fund some of this industrial strategy deals and work. So we've got a number of them have been approved already, and we have bids in at the moment for a few others, including digital manufacturing. So fingers crossed, it's exciting times. So we have not only our current methods of support, but hopefully we'll have this one as well. So I hope that just shows that there's a bit of a rattle through, but we're certainly supporting UK innovative businesses, and we're constantly looking for new ways of doing it. So please do contact me if you need help.